before the meeting.
She just left.
I just left. They didn't even see him for a while, where they saw they were like, holy crap.
She's
The what?
The puppy,
large.
I just took her home.
Anymore, is it?
Mm-mm.
Well, I just told, I was like, well, I don't want to keep it in the room when we're bargaining, just in case. But when they saw the dog, they were in shock.
No.
She's only just
No.
got
That's what I was writing
10
this
months
morning.
and
Oh,
she's
okay.
24 pounds.
She's like a body pillow worth of dog.
She is like all built up, like.
All right.
But I'll say that we call it.
You ready? Hey there. So sorry. All right. Thank you. Yep.
We've got their proposal from last
Mr.
time.
President.
Yeah.
Sorry, ma'am.
Who's
And
that?
just have through their proposal.
Who's that?
Who's that?
And just say that we're still.
All right, everybody, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us back here today for PESPA bargaining. Believe that the light, it is pretty chilly. We might want to adjust the AC. Sorry, are y'all comfortable? You're okay?
Fine. We just walked in here, so it's a little warm. out
Yeah.
there. Yeah, we're a little
5
different.
degrees.
We have
No,
jackets.
thank you.
Outside.
The blue belly.
Yeah, so I'm glad that we're in the, so I'm glad that we're in the distance, because I don't wanna. I'm sweaty.
Our last bargaining session took place over at the PCSB building, and I believe that we were the last to extend a counter, and so we were
Open it to them.
hopeful or glad to pass that ball back into your court.
Excellent. All right. So we actually do not have a written back to today. We have a couple of things that we've heard from you last time that we are working cost out, and we have a few of those things, but we're still working on capturing a few of those. So I would just like to maybe just walk through that, and if we have any discussions, we can do that as we move forward. So I'm just going to start off the bat with number one, and that was salaries and the request of PESPA was the $18 per hour, the 7.3. So we'll go back to the just the reminder of the 3 point. I'm so sorry. So we did the cost out for that. Let me take it one thing at a time. The cost out for that for the PESPA group would be 6.5 million without fringe and 8 million with fringe. I know we have without fringe, with fringe, but we're just going to put it out there so we understand the numbers that we're working with. And going back to our original offer, 3.5%, that equated to 2.5 million. So we are a little still far apart on that, I would say, but I will also say that we are continuing, as we have been doing every single week, is going back and looking at where else can we draw some money from to assist with our salaries. So at this point, we are rejecting the proposal from regarding salaries from PESPA, maintaining the 3.5%, but we are continuing, and we've got some options that we're working on right now in the next couple of days that we're just not prepared I was going to say this morning. It's been a long day. This afternoon that we will continue to work on for that.
Okay.
The second item regarding the increase in healthcare, we know that you had requested that the board pick up the increase in healthcare for the PESPA group. And at that, we are rejecting at this point. But again, I think this is all a salary compensation package. And we're going to continue to look at that. And just for an understanding of that, for PESPA group, it is just under $890,000 increase for that, for the group for healthcare, which is about a 1.4% part of the salary.
1.4% increase to premiums, right?
It's a 1.4% equivalent salary increase. by picking that up. So, so
Mhm.
if you're looking at the $800,000, that's the equivalent of what a 1.4% raise would be in this group.
On average.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the next one, we had, you had requested providing access to and no fees for children, family dependents, or legal wards of the bargaining unit employees to participate in before, after care and extended voluntary pre-K programs. So we already know that this year we have implemented the pre-K for employees at no charge. So, you know, that is already kind of moving forward and in process. As we were asking about the charges for the before, after care, you know, they do range. I do know that they're on a sliding scale as well. I know that there is discounts for employees already. I don't have that all listed out because I'm not in charge of that, but we can get that if needed. But the other concern, or the other, just like anything right now, when I asked about this, is I didn't realize there are already waiting lists for these before and after care programs, which it doesn't, I don't know why it surprised me, but it does, because everybody is having staffing shortages. So we're talking, even if we had the ability to do that, we would not have the ability to do that because there's not even the locations. And I'm not saying that that's across the board at every single site, but YMCA. Yeah. But I'm not saying at every site.
No.
So I can't speak for every site. So the ask to provide at no fee or no charge, there's not the availability even to do that because of their staffing shortages as well. Or I shouldn't say staffing shortages. It's just the programs don't have the employees to man the amount of maybe the influx that might come in from that. So again, we can continue to look at that, but again, in the time frame that we were given, that's kind of the concerns that were brought up. The fourth one about the board will pay licensing, renewal, credentialing, professional development, other fees required for continued licensure or certification of the employees whose jobs require them. So we really thought that this meant, and I do apologize if I didn't ask really for specific, but we kind of thought it's kind of like our nurses, our CDAs. I'm not sure. I'm sure there's probably something else in there, but I didn't. Those were the two groups that we really.
Occupation therapy.
Those are the assistants, right? The OT assistants,
Yes.
right?
Our MBAs have some continuing education.
MBAs,
Yes.
Yeah.
That are all provided though by the district.
Yeah,
We just looked at this today.
This 45-hour credentialing is provided by the district.
Right.
That one is covered already.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm going to take we got a whole lot of information. And again, I think just our nurses out there know a whole lot more about all the requirements than probably I do. But looking and talking with Sarah O'Toole and team, there are definite continuing education units that they need to maintain. I will also share that Sarah thought that I know before the pandemic, a lot of those trainings were offered through in-house and through district, and she is already making plans to continue those and move forward with that. There was the certification that we were able to do costing out, and it seemed like every 2 years it cost it would cost the district about $10,000. So if we look at annually, it might be about $5,000, and that is something that we will absolutely consider looking into with the final agreement. A lot of the other credentialing is the job onboarding, the hours that they do, not onboarding, as they do their jobs, and I'm trying to look at the name that they call it. Forgive me for a minute. What is it when you're doing my job? You guys speak up.
If they do what?
That they do it on their hours. It's amount of hours that they do.
Continuing education.
Continuing education. Anyway, that's probably it.
Yep.
The CDAs, I know, Jen Meckler oversees our CDAs. And once a CDA is on board, the majority of their trainings is offered through Pinellas County Schools. And that is documenting hours with working with children that goes into their renewal and their recertification. They also had a proof of current individual membership in an early childhood professional organization. And depending on that, I know the district doesn't cover that, but that could be something that we talk about. Again, I think a lot of you're shaking, so you must see that, you know that. So I know that there's choice in that though, right? So again, so maybe you want to speak to that.
Matter of fact, I am one of the current CDAs and mine is actually coming up as of a renewal in March.
Okay.
And I brought the documents for you to look, if you want to keep them.
I'll take whatever you've got. So, yep.
And it offers where, on those that are just strictly CDAs that don't have a higher education, that they
Yep.
have a breakdown of everything
Thank
that
you.
has to be done.
Yep.
And not everything is included into the PCS board for PLN for a CEU, that we actually have to go under our DCF transcript of the actual courses that are offered on that website. And then per each of those, it's $10 in an increment for those. And then there's times that even CPR and first aid is not actually offered, where it kind of goes inside with our schedules and stuff, where we would have to do it outside of that. And that can also range up to $100 too.
Right. And Ms. Meckler did share with me a couple of those additional courses, and that currently like one of the courses is offered by the district, but they're looking at getting, how are we going to do the other courses and so forth.
Yeah.
So this is clicking off exactly what she was telling me. Let me take this and look at this a little bit more closely.
Absolutely.
And we'll,
To add on to that though, the formal education part of it, in order to even switch over to having a formal education, you actually have to have so many of the college credit hours, and that's a total of 6 of them. Online, it's $422 per class. And then if you don't do that, if you go into the class, it's close to $400 to do it in person for each class. And it only can be strictly with the preschool education part of it. So I'm currently actually going after my bachelor's right now. So at the end of December, I'll be able to obtain the formal one, but still it's a matter of, that's $422 per class that I had to take in order to switch it over to formal education.
if you made that choice to switch it over to formal
Correct.
education,
Correct.
it's not a requirement of the
It's either
district.
way. Correct. And when you go to if you keep it as just the CDA of renewal, it is every 5 years.
Yes.
If you switch it over to formal, then it's set permanent.
Correct. And that's a
Yeah.
choice, right? So that is, so
Yes.
that's, those are those
Correct.
back and forth
So I
things.
just wanna let
That's
you know.
great information. So no, that's good. And that's when we're talking about pricing it out or putting something in play.
Correct.
We want to make sure we have that.
Just going back, you got 2 more job titles, that we do not mention. One is the interpreters. You have 1 and 2 and 3.
Yep.
And you have the registered physical therapist assistants that they had to have, their license, they had to have
Perfect.
qualifications too.
Thank you. We will get those added to the group. So we could see what
If I,
those requirements might be.
if I go through some of them, I'll let you know. But so far,
That'd be
that's-
awesome. Thank you, Nellie.
Just
Thank you.
clarifying, the 5, pardon me, the 5 or the 10,000 every 2 years. What was that attached to?
It is the fee for renewing the nursing license.
The nursing, okay,
And the CO certificate.
LPN renewal. I'll just clarify, we do not, just for the record, when we're referring to the nurses, we're talking about the LPNs. We have been continually asked by our RNs to include them in our bargaining unit, but they are not yet represented by our bargaining unit. So we're
Okay.
just referring to LPNs.
Okay, okay.
And I think that we might have to look to the CNA, even though we're not having directly doing a CNA job, then, the CNA,
Oh, right.
they're still have to do certifications because even they're not directly doing CNA, but we have them in the centers doing that type of job, but under CNA.
If we have
If we
very
have.
few.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for bringing this. I appreciate it. Does follow suit with just a little bit more information. So I'm going to read the more information. So I think sometimes people give me the short versions and so forth. So that kind of walks through the 4 main items. Obviously, the last one is continued any additional compensation. So I don't know, or contractual points. So I don't know if there's, Kevin, if you had anything else that from a financial standpoint.
No, not really. Other than what you said, we'll continue to look, see if there's any other opportunities for us to provide more of the raise that was originally 3.5% is really kind of outside my level of comfort, but we're looking at some areas that maybe we can do some reductions or some something because we'll continue to do that.
Anything on your?
Nope. Okay. Just to back up just a little bit, as far as the childcare, your analysis on and I know that because so much of it are outside agencies that can contract with the district to provide on campus, so I know that isn't necessarily internal data, but I think that one thing to note about that language was, it could be that the discussion is ongoing and maybe it just doesn't seem, maybe it doesn't, maybe I misinterpreted.
Okay.
But for number 3, the language reads, the board agree, or our counter proposal language read that the board agrees to provide access to and charge no fees for the children, grandchildren, dependents, or legal wards of ESP bargaining unit employees to participate in district sponsored or contracted before school, after school, and or extended voluntary pre-K programs. Just a couple of clarifications. When you said that pre-K has already been extended for employees, I think it's actually been extended universally, right? That's not something that's specific to employees, correct? The voluntary pre-K extended day has been funded.
No, the district is paying for the additional, right? So it's on the half day. It's
Right.
typically half day. The district and they used to charge the other half day. So they are no longer employees. Children are not being charged the additional. Am I correct on that?
Is anyone's children being charged the additional, or is it?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yes.
That's only.
So you only cover the 3 hours
Oh, okay,
after.
so, okay, for
Okay,
some reason, I thought that had been something that was universally extended.
No.
Universal pre-K is for everybody.
But the extended day
Extended day is not-
has been
Right.
extended just for employees. Okay, got
Yep.
it, got it. So that was a misconception on my part. And then the other part of the language that I think is worth noting is that we have asked for access to and no fees for, but certainly another way of, I mean, not to put words in y'all's mouth, but certainly those two parts of the language could be subject to negotiation as well. If there were places where the program wasn't available or was over capacity, that it could be that we could, discuss a movement on those 2 pieces of language to allow for one if the other one wasn't necessarily available. I think that's really the kind of the way that we want to approach the whole thing is looking at what we can do, not and not just what we can't.
Could you explain that a little bit?
Well,
me?
so what we asked for was access to and no fees for employees.
Okay.
But another way of approach, so one of the ways to approach that would be to expand the programs to include the demand created by employees having no charge for it. But we understand, I mean, in the world that we're all living in right now, even if we want to fully staff a program, we want to fully staff our schools, that doesn't necessarily mean that there are candidates out there that are interested in those jobs. And so I can understand how the access part of our counter proposal is perhaps harder to project, because that really depends on creating or bringing employees in to take those positions, even if we were to create them. So I think we all look at it as 2 separate things. It's the creation of access and charging no fees. But even if we weren't able to say, okay, we're going to be able to create spots for every single employee, certainly the employees that had access and their children were on those wait lists could be given the consideration of no charge for childcare. So I'm not putting, like I said, that's up to you all. Our counter is there, but we look at those as two different parts of the same idea.
So if I can just have you clarify for me, number 3 is for the wraparound services provided by either the Y, our
Yeah.
club,
Yeah.
I think we have one other. And so we don't charge for those. We would be paying the Y or our club for something like
Yes.
this to work.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
would be paying the costs for the wraparound services. We don't
But-
charge for that.
Yes, but well, and okay, so that's a good.
They have a sliding scale, I know, for.
That's a
their-
good point.
Yeah,
Do then, so if I was a parent and I'm an employer, really, it doesn't matter. If I was a parent, I'm enrolling my child in the YMCA before school or after school, who am I writing that check to?
the
I
YMCA.
write
they are
directly to the
club, yeah.
Y. I see. So the no fee part of our counter would really more properly read, providing access could be seen as being part of the contracting with these outside agencies. I think that works. But charging no fees would truly be provide no fee access.
It would have to be.
Because then that accounts for the fact that the district would be essentially fronting those fees on behalf of the employee parents.
That's what I read your number 3 to kind of say.
Yeah, that's what I intended.
Yeah.
What I was missing was the idea that it was more direct pay, like we provide a space for the Y to operate, but the funding if I'm paying the childcare fee, as a parent, I'm paying it to the Y.
So, yeah, so what would have to happen is we would have to develop a contract with those outside agencies, that it, that the pay agency. on behalf
Right.
of the employee.
Right, yes. Okay, then yes, that was my intent with it. I can see how the wording of it would be confusing, knowing that the district doesn't charge the fees, they simply allow the Y to charge the fees. So yes, you're right, it would be a separate contract with those providers. Mhm. Okay. Could we? I do think we could, I mean, I know that the district isn't really bringing a counter right now, but you've mentioned that you're still working on some of these numbers. But I think that we could probably still have some discussion about these pieces. Could we caucus is that
Sure.
okay? Do y'all mind going to the library upstairs?
It's all cleaned up.
It's lovely.
Beautiful.
We have to see it.
It's so
'cause
nice.
It honestly didn't bother me.
There was
So
fun.
nice.
It was fun.
Lee did it himself the very next day. It's beautiful.
We're gonna let her know that we go, cause
Lindsay, if you want to text me when you're ready, we can come back down or.
Thanks.
So Nellie and Lindsay, I just wanted to clarify, because I think we stumbled over the VPK and the pre-K just because there's 3-year-old, there's 4-year-old, there's. I just wanted to clarify what employees are eligible for. And we've actually have over 200 employees who are receiving this additional benefit this year. So for all 3-year-olds, so if you're an employee and you have a 3-year-old, they can attend a full day at no charge, right? 4-year-olds attend 3 hours and 10 minutes at no charge because you have your voucher that comes. So just wanted to point. And so let me go back to the 3-year-olds. Typically it's $95 per week for the 36 weeks.
Mhm.
And then the 4-year-olds, half a day, it's $65 per week for the 36 weeks.
We provide the additional half a day, right?
Yes, that's what I just mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so we did have 204, but there's more than 204 employees that are taking part in this year because we do have some special attendance permits that are not necessarily on that. So it's a little higher than 204, but not a whole lot.
Do you happen to know the breakdown of how many are at 95 and how many are at
Nope,
65?
I don't.
Okay,
We just have the total.
okay.
The only other thing that's the only exception to this are the littles. We call them the littles at Countryside and Largo. They're part of that, more of the
have a full day
wraparound, they have a full day wraparound and so forth, but we do
That's
know that they're on a
understand.
sliding scale for that as well, but just wanted to let you know. So I just wanted to clarify that because I wanted to get that in my head as well. So
Okay.
But that's where you confused me when you said that. I was like,
Gotcha.
mm.
Okay,
a little
No, go ahead.
confusing.
okay. So we kind of went back through to make sure that we were following along with the updates, and like you said, you recapped where we were. I think and it took someone else mentioning and I, because y'all sit at both tables, I sit at both tables, it can get a little confusing. But I think that we're somewhat unclear. Here at the PESPA table, we did not receive a 3.5% offer. That was extended at PCTA, but not at PESPA. In fact, the last session when we met, which was I want to say it was last Tuesday or last Monday. 13. Okay, so the 13th. That was not, there was no, even though the ball was sort of in the district's court as far as a counteroffer, there was no counteroffer extended then.
Okay.
Now, we did extend a counteroffer, and perhaps out of timing, but we did come from our initial offer was $20 an hour for all those, or 7.3%, which was the cost of living index, year over year here in Pinellas County. So it was the greater of those two things.
Okay.
So we've actually, this is the second session that we don't have a counter offer from the district. So and we know that we all agree that we are trying to move through this as expeditiously as possible, because even though retro pay is part of the PESPA contract and is guaranteed by the PESPA contract, it's obviously there's a great deal of financial pressure on everybody that benefits from when we get people paid as quickly as possible. So I think that our concern would be that we're 2 more sessions in, and we did have to reschedule. Last week's session was a reschedule from the hurricane, but I think our concern is that we're losing some pace as far as moving closer on an agreement. But not to want to lose the time. We thought that this time could be well spent by hearing from a couple of the employees to which these proposals actually do have a direct impact. I know that we had you come up Tony, and just sort of give some information that you had as a CDA, but you also spoke at the school board meeting a couple of nights ago.
Right.
And so I failed to introduce you when we spoke. This is Tony Boston. She's one of our CDAs with school at Starkey. And she's actually done a great deal of work on some of the specific challenges facing our CDAs as far as compensation goes. So you want to just take a couple of minutes and talk a little bit about that? You did speak to the certification piece, but I think some of the larger concerns for CDAs.
Pretty much, basically stating for like a year of salary could be minimum of 22, basically 22K. Breaking that down to biweekly, where I do pay for your guys' insurance. And it's not the bare minimum, but it's not the maximum either. And I bring home less than $700 a week, every biweekly. And at the same time, though, when it comes down to what our actual job titles are, it's same thing as what an actual teacher is, or what I do is collaborating with the teacher and planning and implementing our lesson plan, and then doing everything to follow our VPK Florida standards that are required for 4 and 5-year-olds. So it's everything that entitles to that, but it's a matter of we are 7.5 hours a day. And at that point, it's only a half hour for our lunchtime. And then I'm at work earlier than that. So I'm actually volunteering my own time. So this way I make sure that everything is being taken care of, because I'm doing data, record keeping, everything. We have our attendance sheets that we have to submit in to our pre-K board. We also have our data collection sheets that we also have to submit into our pre-K board quarterly. So it's an ongoing process on top of doing our STAR data too. So it's not just a matter of making sure we have enough time and then providing more materials for our students to be able to have that quality education at all times. I'm providing that from my own pay.
And I think one of the reasons that has become pertinent, just in the last, we talk about the fact that we like to address issues at the table that have come up during the year as needing some attention. And one of the issues that's come up just during the week for our CDAs was, and I think, Tony, wasn't this specifically you, that you were not, even though she is responsible for the instruction, for the planning and delivery of instruction in her VPK class, in your VPK classroom, are there 2 CDAs?
No, there's actually a degree held lead teacher for the ESE students, and then I am considered as the support staff for the VPK students, even though by Florida State, I am an actual certified teacher. So in order to have the VPK classroom, you have to have a CDA.
So, and knowing that obviously the VPK classrooms look different in different settings. In the public school setting, or the setting that we have here in Pinellas County, you actually are assigned a group of students that are specifically your students. You're exclusively responsible for those students. Okay.
Correct.
So one of the issues that came up, and this is just to give some context, you were asked or not asked, I guess,
Correct.
to attend your school. Do you want to delve into that?
I wasn't asked, but we had a back to school night, and because they are my VPK students, me personally, I felt obligated to be there to see my parents and go over expectations of what the school year is going to be entitled, along with going through what our VPK standards are, everything that entitles with back to school night, and what they're going to expect with our classroom, our behaviors, everything. And it was just a matter of when I talked with my administration about compensation, they had stated that it's only for instructional and not for support staff. And it kind of hit me at a wrong angle right there. Because I'm like, these are my students too.
Right.
So,
Well, not just
So,
two,
and
they're your students.
I'm going to just speak to that, because for some reason, I will tell you that question has arisen time and time again. And our response to them is, yes, you are to be compensated for that. So I appreciate you telling me. I heard where you are and where you're working, and we will clarify that, and you absolutely should be compensated for that hour, 2 hours, or whatever it is for the open house night. I'm a former elementary principal, so I know exactly what you're referring to. And so we will clarify that, and I will make sure that all of our elementary schools are aware of that. So those are those type of fixes that I know that we I'll tell you, we handle situations and individual situations such as this on a daily basis, and we want to make it, you should be compensated. So we can handle those situations as they come up, and it's just getting in touch with, I don't mean to say my name, but getting in touch with HR, and we will handle that and take care of that for you. So I do recognize, and I will also, if I can, I know this is one job title or position we've been talking about. I know there are many others in your unit. But I do know some of these topics I know are working with the early childhood team, and absolutely can be addressed, with that and a working, and so forth. So, absolutely, I appreciate the comments because we can make sure we can
And I know in the past, we were still.
rectify that. I'm
I
so
know
sorry,
For a
Nellie.
couple of years, we were still working with the CDAs, trying to change the job description and their names. And I know that was part of the process that we're supposed to continue, and we just kind of stopped on it, but we have to.
Well,
go.
I think I'll clarify that because I don't really want that going out there, that we've been trying to work on that for years. We have always had, like any other position, we work on those situations when they arise. I don't know if we've talked about changing a job title name, but you might want to get to that point, and we can certainly have those conversations at another time, and work through that process. So.
I would appreciate
Sure.
that.
Well, and the reason I bring it up is
And I'm okay to bring it up. I'm just wanting
Yeah,
to
yeah.
make sure that correct information is being out there.
And usually, like you said, like if in an individual situation, if, for example, if Tony was being asked to attend and it was mandatory and she was being denied comp time or denied compensation, then no, that, that's a clear contractual issue. We would reach out. I think it speaks a little bit more to the idea that of our description of this all hands on deck approach that all staff is having to take in the face of the staff exodus. And we want to make sure that they are not, because they are stepping up to take on so much additional work, that they're compensated for that additional work. As they're bearing additional responsibility, they should be compensated for that. So that's why I highlighted
Yes.
Well, and I do think it's very, I agree with you if anybody is asked to be doing things that are outside their realm, but that's where we always pull up our job descriptions and we look at that when questions do arise, because there's a purpose for job descriptions, right? And we want to make sure that everything is being asked of is in their job description. So.
Right, yes, but I think it's not just the job description, like the individual responsibilities within the job description. It's the scope of what that entails on a daily basis. And we've talked about that at the instructional table, at the PCTA table. But I think that a lot of these conditions hold true across units. It's not just the job description, it's how much of a job that it is in the face of such an extreme staff exodus, and some of the additional pressures that have been created by universal vouchers, which has impacted our funding here locally. And actually, even though technically it applies more to the instructional unit, there's an impact of the erasure of fees in violation of the class size amendment. So we've talked a little bit about the fact that the class size amendment was put into place, of course, to regulate the number of students in a given class by grade level. And that's been watered down, progressively by, the adoption of the district-wide average, which most large districts do operate by. But there has still been an element of accountability to it up until on each district until this year. Now we have the removal of any kind of accountability to really not just state law, but the Florida Constitution, when their financial penalties for noncompliance with the class size amendment were removed. Now that again specifically speaks to instructional units, but it has an impact on our support employees that are assigned to those units as well. And so we wanted to speak to that in sort of in relationship to something that we talked about at the instructional table. And even though we're sort of out of our own timing, like I said, we have we have made 2 counter proposals in a row and haven't had, the counter officially from the district. They're recognizing that it sounds like y'all were, like you said, verbally extending a 3.5%
We did.
increase. We are prepared to extend a counter proposal, just again, to keep the process moving forward, but in a
Yeah.
way that is meaningful for our members. And so, if you want to, Ryan, you can go ahead. Let me get a copy of it first. Thank you. I'll go ahead and speak to it. So while this is being passed out, you're welcome to take a look at it. I'll just go through it for those attending and those watching online. We have extended a counter offer to an increase to $18 an hour for all bargaining unit employees currently earning up to $16.76 per hour, or a 5.9% increase per hour for all bargaining unit employees currently earning $16.77 per hour or more. This actually, I think it's important to state here at this table, and every opportunity we get, that our proposals are data driven. They are not plucked from thin air. They are not a matter of opinion. They reflect the skyrocketing increase in the cost of living specific to our area. And these new data was published by the Department of Labor last month. Or rather, yeah, it was published last month for the previous month, year over year, and that showed a 5.9% increase in cost of living year over year. That is in addition to a over 10% increase last year. So it's actually dealing with more than a 15% increase over the last 2 years, which of course is astronomical, particularly on some of our lowest paid employees. As we've discussed, it's preventing our professionals from living in our communities and working in our schools, period. And that puts even more pressure on the staff shortage and on the impact of the universal vouchers and the dilution of the class size amendment. So we are making some in good faith and in a desire to try to come to some resolution sooner rather than later. We have gone down to $18 an hour or 5.9%. Whichever one is greater. Each of the other items is the same as what we proposed previously, no increases to health insurance. And for number 4, I did go back and adjust the language quickly after our discussion to make it clearer that we are asking that the board agree to provide access to no fee participation, even though those fees are not paid directly paid to the district, and therefore the district, it doesn't receive the fees. Mm-hmm. The district does pay or have a contract with these providers that provide those services on campus. And so therefore there is some control over the financial aspects of that, or could be negotiated. So I did adjust the language there to hopefully represent what we were talking about. The credentialing discussion that we had, that's in number 5, obviously our continuation clause in number 6, but number 3, I wanted to draw your attention to. In somewhat different but very, very much related ways, the staff exodus creates pressures that are perhaps within the job description of our professionals that are our ESPs, but compounded in volume. So it might be within what I normally do, but if I'm doing it for so many more students, or with no one to share that responsibility, it does have an impact that goes, I think, beyond what has, we could state in perhaps previous years. Yeah. So I've tried here to put into language, in related language to what's been extended across the PCTA table, but specific to our ESP. So I'm just going to read it. The parties agree that absences include vacancies, and that vacancies are understood to be those existing at the 23-24 10-day count of full-time equivalent students and in compliance with all pertinent federal and state law and with the students class ratios prescribed in the class size amendment to the Florida Constitution, extended to all non-core classes by grade level. That is not to suggest that that it's coming down to shifting coverage to being by head count, by the number of students. It is to acknowledge, though, that when we're missing employees, those students have to go somewhere. That work has to be done by someone, and it falls on the shoulders of our existing employees. As such, any educational support bargaining unit employee who provides coverage or is assigned additional duties in the case of absence of any other employee will be entitled to substitute pay at their regular hourly rate, prorated for time worked in such coverage or assignment during a regular workday. That is related to what we do on the instructional unit, where and there's a bridge to the support unit. If we have an absent teacher, then depending on the grade level, those students are either I might be asked to cover during my planning period, or those students might be dispersed in my classroom, depending on the grade level. There's something similar that exists between the two units when our support staff are asked to do the same thing, to cover for an absent teacher. However, there is not, to this extent, compensation for taking on additional responsibilities when any other employee is absent. So for example, if I am a PE assistant, and there is provision for another PE assistant that's been established by unit allocation, but that position is not filled or they're absent, or that I take on those additional students, similar to the way that a CDA is exclusively responsible. That model for our PE assistants is pretty much comparable to where they're exclusively responsible for instruction, but yet they're not compensated for those additional students, and certainly not in compliance with class size amendment ratios. Right, they're not compensated for unlimited ratios, much less that is protected by under the class size amendment. So it's a lot of additional work that's perhaps within the existing job description, but it goes far beyond the volume. And I actually wanted to ask Stacy, will you come up and talk a little bit about that, about the way that you're affected by that in your work? Stacy's one of our longtime union members and happens to be here. So it actually worked out well because she can share the way that she's impacted by this.
Okay, what happens is, it's usually, art or music. Over here.
Yeah.
It's
I just wanted to
usually,
see.
art or music that, if they're absent, they send all their kids to PE. And at my school, as an assistant, I have a group, just like the teachers, I have a group, and I have the same amount of kids as they do. And so when someone's absent, if they're in my group on, the regular day, they come out, so I have more kids. And the teachers, they split the pay, but assistants aren't compensated. I had supposedly it was comp time that we got, and then I had a situation last year where I was told that they were just doing me a favor by giving me that time. They didn't want to compensate. And we had a lot of absences last year where I got to like 40 hours worth of where I should have been compensated, but we don't have enough days where the kids aren't in school for me to be able to use it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Stacy. And so it worked out nicely that you were here so you could tell your own story, because we hear this, and it's not just PE assistants or not just CDAs, but it happens in a number of different job descriptions where they might be asked to do work that's within their scope, but the volume of it is so different in the face of the shortage that they must be compensated for the additional work that they're putting in. Did you have something to add?
I did. And it's regarding to what Lindsay's been talking about. I actually have a coworker that this actually happened last year. Her co-teacher was out absent the one day, but prior to that, she already had somebody had picked up the job, and then not even 24 hours later, they canceled the job, and then needless to say, the job was still left vacant. So she actually had to take care of the whole class just by herself. So we periodically checked in on her to make sure she was doing okay and stuff like that. But it was a matter of she was the teacher and the CDA all in one. So,
Yeah.
So to just, and again, I'm not going to speak, I'll speak generally because again, every situation is just very unique. There are, as you know, there are processes in place for when we do have the emergency sub availability for our support staff who do meet that credentials to be a sub, that they are then compensated. On those that do not, you're right, we try to do comp time, whatever, but that's a little extreme with the numbers, and I get that. So, and I would assume most likely that person may have met the requirements to be that emergency sub so that they could go ahead and be compensated for that. Those, I heard something about a 24-hour and then somebody canceled it. We
Yes.
run into that at times where a sub has been put in, but they're just like us too. Some things happen, emergencies happen, family
Right.
life happens,
Right.
and they cancel. But we always, our process is that we're always going back and handling and taking care of those situations. So if those are some things that we need to continue to work on and get that rectified and fixed for that individual person, because we can only go by what is in the system. So it's not an excuse, but it's let's talk it out a little bit and we can work on that. I also wanted to just, I know we've heard a lot about the mass exodus, the mass leaving. I monitor the numbers very closely year over year. And I've got a twofold thing here. I've got the substitutes because that seems to be one of the concerns too. But I will just let you know, this year for the time frame, first day of school till now, right? We have about 50 less. And I know people don't like this term, terminations, and it just means separations from the district for any reason, right? It was pretty steady over the last couple of years, at a certain number, and it's 50 less this year. So I know we still have people who are leaving, but I just want to put that into perspective a little bit. It was 275, and this year we're at 225, right? So I just want to say our separations have slowed down a little bit. I will also tell you that our substitute rate was something that we have now have been in school. I forgot the week because we've had so many disruptions already. But this year, our substitute fill rate is significantly higher than it was even last year and truly 2 years ago when we were dealing with the pandemic. And I'm not saying that is answering every single person's situation here, because again, I preface by saying every situation is unique, but I will say that thankful to our employees and our substitutes who are coming on board, and our substitutes are showing up. And we continue to reach out and hopefully, I know that's not this group, but I just want to let you know.
No,
that
but it's
it
related.
is. So I just want to make sure that
It's related.
kind of was shared. And I will also, because I do know that, and I know we want to keep this cadence going on. So I want to make sure we have time to schedule our next meeting, which can be sooner rather than later. I don't think we need to wait 2 weeks. But I know we had issues. Our ultimate goal is to raise our salaries for all of our employees to the best that we can do. And that was one thing that's why I wanted to start off this afternoon with that. Hours upon hours, we are continuing to go back even this morning. We are continuing to do this every single day of where else can we go and pull from, because we want to make sure whatever we can do to get those extra funds, because our goal is to continue to give the most possible to our employees. So I just wanted to kind of share that.
Sure. And I appreciate that. Certainly I appreciate your having the data about absences. I will say that I took a call from a reporter this morning that had questions that I didn't have the answers to. But one of the things was bringing up the fact that, and I can't quote him exactly because I didn't see it, but the reporter asked me about, for my comment on the idea that the superintendent had made a statement. And I don't know if it was in the board workshop. To be honest, I don't know. Speaking to the fact that there were several collapsed units since the very beginning of the school year, and specifically used the term the number 50, which is interesting because you're saying 50 fewer 50 fewer vacancies year over year.
I know my 50 that I just stated was the number of people who have left who have terminated from the district.
Okay.
Because you were
referencing.
You had referenced the mass exodus of employees leaving our district. And we do monitor that. And it's very interesting over the last 3 years. It's really kind of been, status. But what I'm telling you, in the same time frame as the last 2 years, we've had 50 less employees leave us in the
Separations.
same separations.
50 fewer separations,
Yeah, so
certainly.
it's not, it doesn't have anything to do with you. It has nothing to do with the number of units. It doesn't have, it's about
Yeah.
the number of people as you were referencing.
Well, and and thank you for clarifying. I understand what you're saying. The language that we've included here is, would speak to both the vacancies created by those separations, or terminations, like you said, but it can be for many reasons, but also by just the absence of filling existing vacancies, or even the elimination of vacancies through collapsing the units. And that's what I'm speaking to. And again, I hate to speak on something that I myself didn't see or hear directly, but I was asked the question today
Okay.
about how to address the superintendent's statement that there had been 50 units that were collapsed. Instructional, but it has an impact on the ESD unit. So I would appreciate clarification on that.
Lindsay, if I can just add, it does have an impact, but the impact is lessened by the fact that our student count has gone down. So there's less students, and that's the reason for the right sizing.
Well, I think I'll push back on that a little bit. I'm certainly not saying that the student count hasn't gone down. I believe what you're saying. I am confident that the student count has not gone down to the same extent that we are seeing, number one, vacancies unfilled. Number two, whether that is created through a separation or it was an existing vacancy, or that those units have been or could be collapsed and then split up into existing classes. And it is going to have a disproportionate impact on, we talked about at the instructional table, our non-core classes. Pardon me, because they're not as they're not represented in the same numbers at any school. And that would be the kind of thing that is tied directly to our PE assistants, for example. Okay. So while I do recognize that and acknowledging that it's an impact of the universal voucher law, that we lose students to charter schools, or we're paying for students who were never here at all, and they've just been in private schools the whole time. But the effect that has, when you couple it with the elimination of any kind of financial accountability for or penalties for noncompliance with the class size amendment, that creates a perfect storm whereby these classes, and therefore the workloads of all of our professionals that are work directly with students, it's impacted. So I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that I don't think that that's exactly apples, that it's exactly apples to apples. And I do also understand the use of the term right sizing, but I would push back that if we're going to use a term like that, I think we should probably reserve attaching it to people. That when we say right sizing, we talk about operations, not pushing the labor of people, the ones who work directly with students, beyond what can be seen as being part of their regular job duties. I just don't think that we can talk about those things in
Use the
using
word
the same term.
adjustments then instead. There's adjustments that are made, but a lot of that is because of
Yeah.
the decline in the student count.
Right, but I think that, yes, and I can understand that. I just think that the adjustments are disproportionate to the number of students that we lose, again, according to these changes in state law that have brought us to this point. I'll also point out that even though I did not hear the superintendent refer specifically to the collapsing of those 50 units, it was brought to my attention, but I did not hear it myself. I will say that what I did hear myself during the initial board workshop on the budget that was adopted this past week at the school board meeting, the superintendent did speak to the fact that attrition is a part of the budgeting process for the district. And he even spoke to the fact that Mr. Smith, he referred to Mr. Smith, that Mr. Smith would say that he probably has to depend on attrition to balance the budget, because it is literally built on the idea of vacancies existing, and that's the way that we make it work. That just doesn't work. It doesn't work for the people that are left behind to do that work.
He says that not for any other reason other than to refer to the adjustment in units. If you look at the numbers of students that we've declined by over the last several years, it's significant. As little as 10 or 12 years ago, we had about 113,000 students. Now we have about 80.
Mhm.
So when he talks about attrition, 80, that's 80 net of.
Sorry, I thought we were
charter
closer to
schools.
90.
Yeah, no, it's 80 net of charter schools.
Mm, yeah.
So when you talk about attrition, you're talking about the fact that we have students that are leaving. And we have to adjust the numbers of employees we have relative to that. It has to be at the administrative level, at the instructional level, and support services level. And that's what he's referring to, because as our students decline, our revenues likewise decline. So if we're not doing that, if we're not adjusting that, then we're gonna wind up in a situation where we don't have money for raises. So that is a part of how we get money for raises, because we have to tie our revenue to the numbers of resources that we employ, being teachers or things we buy or whatever, because it's directly tied to funding. So I believe that, I don't want to speak for the superintendent, but I believe that's what he was alluding to, the fact that attrition is a way that we pay for raises, mainly because we're adjusting our employee numbers to the numbers of students that we have, because
Yeah,
our funding comes directly from students.
Sorry, I don't mean to correct you on that. He wasn't referring to raises. He was specific, he was referring to the budgeting process when he wasn't speaking to raises. He was talking about budgeting, that attrition was the basis of the
don't
budget
know-
process.
I don't know the specifics of what he was referring to, but I'm certain he was talking about the fact that we have the declining.
And look, it's, I mean, understandable, like you said, I don't disagree with the idea that adjustments have to be made. In fact, all of this language, whether it's here or on the instructional side, is based on the idea that adjustments were made up until the 10-day count. But that adjustments after that are truly being made without any real accountability to the number of students. I mean, the only accountability that I can find that's still binding upon the district is like the fire code. If there's no, well, I will say in this unit, there should be additional accountability built into federal funding that is tied to the provision of services for our students with special educational needs, special medical needs. And by and large, those additional services are provided by our ESC teachers, of course, and some of our instructional staff, but very much based on the work of the employees represented in this unit, in our support unit. Now, I know that you've said that that funding has been relatively static. It's not increased over the past few years within probably a $5 million range. But $50 to $55 million a year, and that's understandable, and that's I think on our federal government as far as funding. But to keep the funding that we have now, those services have to be provided, and that's very much based on the work of these professionals. So I think that there are a lot of ties between on the instructional side and on the support side that are in response to a shortage, whether that's based on exit or it's based on never having filled the positions at all. I will say also, sorry, and I just while we're adding it, I know that we're a little bit over, but I did want to point out that one of the certificates, because we still are asking for the licensing, and thank you so much for bringing those numbers that it would be a $5,000 to $10,000 expense, which is very small for the district every 2 years. Our LPNs had signed it wasn't a petition exactly, but they were letters of support. And there's a number of them that were delivered to the superintendent, to the school board. I got copies of them, a lot of them. And they did ask there for a number, and their justification for it went into a great deal of detail, but they've asked that LPN wages be increased across the board to no less than $28 an hour, that the RN hourly rate increased to $36 an hour. An existing nurse employee shall receive the new base rate plus an additional 75 cents for each full year of employment since the most recent date of hire. Again, this is not my own proposal. This was something that the LPNs proposed, because they were comparing it to the RN or the community LPN rate of, I believe it was 38. They're also asking for or they also explained why their mandatory shelter duty should be paid at their full base rate plus half for the entire length of their deployment. And they've also asked for additional tuition assistance, which of course we're referring to here, and an enforcement of their 30-minute lunch. They go into a great deal of detail there, but I did want to highlight it because even though they're not here speaking today, they're just another example of some of our employees that are in shortage and are looking at opportunities outside of the district where they could pay more, or they could be paid more, and that could afford them the true living wage that would allow them to live and support their families here in Pinellas County. We would like to be able to do that, to keep them doing that great work in Pinellas County schools.
Okay, so we've got a lot to go quantify, and but again, it's not a whole lot because we've been working on this. I will reiterate to you all that we are continuing to look at raising those salaries to the highest extent possible. And I would love to schedule a next meeting. I don't think we need to wait 2 weeks. So I don't know if, and I say that without checking with my team, but, we could schedule for early next week. I do know, and I know, Lindsay, you said we're both sitting at both tables, so I know we
Yeah.
have another one later this week, and sorry, I don't mean to not, but it's just the timing of it all, so.
We could, with our constraints,
Oh, geez.
we could meet on Wednesday, the 27th. I hate to throw off the timing of it, but the earliest we could meet would be Wednesday, the 27th of next week, though we could set up additional meetings next week. We could do Wednesday, the 27th, Thursday, the 28th.
I have, first year principal meeting. God. And 4 o'clock is the earliest that,
On the 27th?
yeah,
Okay,
no, I'm
Oh.
asking, it's
Yes,
4
4
o'clock.
4
Yes.
o'clock, yes, in order for our employees to be
We have a
able
listen
to.
and learn session that evening. I have another meeting I'm presenting at that evening
Wednesday.
at 4:30.
Thursday, oh, I'm sorry, did you say you have that Wednesday and Thursday?
I can do Thursday.
Okay, we can do Thursday,
I-
the 28th.
Okay,
Hopefully we'll be able to come to an agreement at the other table on Wednesday, but if not, we've got some more flexibility on that side if we need to schedule a slightly tighter window on that side. So hopefully we can get a lot done next week.
okay, thank
Okay,
you.
all right, thank you.
Get my blood flowing, fixes.